All right, hello and welcome back to Real Seekers. I'm your host, Dale, the Real Seeker. And this is just a supplemental bonus show. Obviously, I'm still on my vacation in August here, although I'll be doing shows behind the scenes and saving them, starting and posting those in September and that sort of thing. So even during my vacation, I do have a few shows that I'm going to be doing behind the scenes at least, and then posting later on. But this one I felt needs to go up now, even though I'm on vacation, because it's kind of a supplemental to the show I did on my 11 premise argument with David Johnson the other day. And essentially, some of the feedback I've gotten some feedback saying that, hey, it was a little bit confusing and stuff. So let's take a quick look at some of the feedback that I've gotten just very quickly. You have this atheist and skeptic, Matthew Taylor, for example, and me and Matt go back. We've had some issues and that sort of thing. He's very, very biased. He's someone who's been mentally scarred from his experiences as a Christian, that sort of thing, and he leaves as is typical of Matthew Taylor, a rude and disgusting comment, as he does here, that's kind of just meant to be insulting and not really edifying. In the interest of being edifying, though, because I had such a great conversation with David and it was polite and cordial, and he's shown me the respect of letting me get out my 11 premise argument, I'm not going to respond in kind to Matthew Taylor, but I am going to just read his comment, and it raises an issue, right? So, did anyone else find themselves getting dizzy listening to this? He's referring to the show I did with David Johnson on my 11 premise argument for the truth of Christianity and or for the endorsement of Christianity by God. And he says, dear goodness, someone stop this merry-go-round. Oh, and if something needs 20 million pages to explain, then maybe, just maybe, the author doesn't understand it themselves. So Matt is saying he was getting a little bit dizzy and confused, and he wasn't understanding a lot of the stuff. And he's not alone here. I've gotten other people saying this too from various sides, including my own old co-host on Faith Unaltered, Tyler Fowler, who's a Christian. He says, hey, Tyler here, y'all. I'm looking for some feedback from you. I'm just wondering, could you honestly understand and follow this video from start to finish without getting lost in the weeds of technical jargon, or was it just me? Let me know, as this will be a pinned comment. I'm genuinely looking for honest feedback about your ability to understand and follow this video. Thanks much. No, nobody responded to Tyler, kind of thing. In fact, all the comments supported me and said, yeah, this show is great. We love the in-depth stuff. But I think that Tyler and Matt are correct in that I think it would have been better if I had done a solo show first, explaining it simply, my 11 premise argument first, without any counters and that sort of thing, and then had the discussion with David. Because obviously, in discussions, things get lost. We go down rabbit trails, or sometimes David would bring up irrelevant objections that weren't exactly proper to my argument or relevant to my argument, but that's kind of the point of having a discussion. Hey, you can see this being an objection. We talk it out. Oh, that's relevant or not, or how would I respond to it, and stuff like that. So I can see that on some of that stuff it might get confusing. Like, we're not technically strictly sticking to the premises. Sometimes we would go off track and stuff like that. And again, a great discussion needed to be said. David felt that these were objections that were relevant, and we needed to go through that to see whether they weren't or not. But I can understand, okay, for other people that might get confusing. So in this show, I want to address that and give a very short summary, uninterrupted or no sidetracks, and just list my premises and just very, very briefly explain what the premises in my 11 premise argument are. And that's it. That's all that this show is going to be. It's a summary show. And obviously, I'm keeping like I said in the show, I need to update this because the 2018 version is a standard form argument, and I need to make it proper. And it's a deductive argument, so presumably I'd want it to follow certain deductive argument patterns just to make it even more clear for the audience and stuff like that. But for the purposes of the show with David, I just kept it as is, and I, updated some clunky terminology. So instead of a G belief authenticating event, I would call it a religion authenticating event, something like that. But other than that, I kept it the same because that wouldn't be fair for David, right? He's got what's on my blog right now posted back in 2018 or whatever. And yeah, if I totally changed up the argument, he would be, well, where it would just lead to more confusion. So for the purposes of the discussion between us, and for the purposes of this summary show, I more or less just kept it as what I've presented on my blog for years. And I'll do the updates at some later time just to strengthen it. And again, the essence of the argument is going to be the exact same. There's just one thing, because another thing here. Oh, and if someone needs 20 million pages to explain, then maybe, just maybe, the author doesn't understand it themselves. So I think this is something that somebody else has said too. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I can just say, and maybe, just maybe, the reader is too dumb or stupid or intellectually lazy. And that is the case with Matthew Taylor. He's had access for years, my writings. He doesn't read them. He's too lazy. He just wants to mindlessly assert that Dale doesn't understand it, but I do, and the proof is out there for people who've actually read it. I've been complimented like great from on my 300-page Shroud chapter, for example. Joe Marino, one of the foremost world Shroud experts, one of the highest compliments I've ever gotten. He said my work on the artistic theories, he specified those, are the best and most comprehensive take that's out there. So that's a high compliment. Whether that's true or not, the fact that Joe, who's familiar with all the literature, he thinks that, it just goes to show, yeah, it's not just incoherent ramblings of pages. No, there's a reason it has to be 300 pages. And I'm happy to give a comprehensive examination. I'm doing my best to lay it all out there. I'm not trying to write a summary paper or a short little summarized thing. No, I'm getting into all the weeds and all the details that are relevant for my argument. And I think it's great work that's needed. We need in-depth presentation. Christian apologists giving the popular level presentation, they're a dime a dozen. They're all doing that. And they do far better than I, even when I try to do that. And I'm going to keep trying to do that because I think that's important too. Although I have to admit I suck at that, but I am good at putting out for free in-depth stuff as to my reasoning. And that's the purpose of my writings, right? Because he's specifically talking about my writings, that 300-page Shroud chapter, as well, my 200-page cosmological argument. Oh, I've been so edified when I've gotten atheists and skeptics emailing me saying what an impact my writing on the cosmological argument has had for them, including some saying it's the best that's available for free online, and stuff. And I'm not going to take the credit. A lot of that primary work was done by Dr. William Lane Craig, scientists, as well as Dr. Alexander Pruss was a huge motivation. So they deserve most of the credit, but I've obviously taken their work and modified it into my own version of the argument and kind of organized things a bit differently based on their research and stuff like that. But yeah, no, the length of a book, they're way longer than hundreds of pages. I mean, Craig Keener's got like 10,000 pages. He's got like massive 4 volumes. Just because it's long doesn't mean that the author doesn't understand. Matthew, that's not a smart thing to do. You're just asserting and assuming, like a lazy skeptic, really, that I don't understand. How about you actually give the arguments? Use your brain, take the time, read through it, and then give substantive reasons. That's what I expect and demand from anyone who claims to have an intellectual right to their opinion and to judge me and my work and research. If you just give this kind of mindless response, then I have zero respect for you. You have no right to your opinion, and just don't say anything at all. So that's my take on that little thing, because it's stupid to say, well, because it's a lot of pages, hundreds of pages, or thousands of pages. People have written entire books on single arguments. That's why it's so long. My goodness, this guy just doesn't do a lot of reading apparently. But anyways, forget about that. Let's get into the summary of my 11 premise argument. So my 11 premise argument is going to be based on, look, undue confusion, right? This is a thing. I mentioned that this is an atheist argument, and I'm co-opting it and changing it into proof for miracles. And originally I was right, Michael Martin in The Improbability of God. And then Theodore Drange, he also has this paper up on Phil Papers for people for free again. But he has this on the infidels argument from confusion. And this is kind of what I use as justification for God as a real maximally great being, not allowing undue confusion in my premise 9. Anyways, let's get into the premises very quickly and just explain them very, very briefly, right? Okay, so premise 1 is that God exists, and God has to be a real maximally great being for this argument to work. He is the creator and sustainer of the universe and human beings, either directly or indirectly. He has all the great-making properties to the maximal possible degree: omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, morally perfect. He has libertarian free will, all of that good stuff, kind of thing, in terms of what you would get, the God of the philosophers or something like that. And that's a minimal definition. So he might be more. He might be also the Christian God who has a human nature and is a Trinity and incarnated in the year 6 BC. He can have a whole bunch of other properties, but minimally, he's a real maximally great being. Premise 2 just says, look, well, if this God exists, if you define him, well, then he has certain outcomes. He has certain goals, right? He's a rational agent and a libertarian free will agent who has reasons for the choices that he makes. And this includes his choice of creating human beings. So he has some kind of ultimate purpose for human beings that he wants the maximum number of these human beings to fulfill, whatever maximum number is possible. Maybe that's all of them. Maybe it's just some subset of them for some reason, because it requires humans' free will to accomplish. We don't get into that in premise 2. It just says, look, God at least indirectly created human beings. Therefore, he had to under the rationality condition for freedom, he had to have a reason for making that very significant choice. Okay, and he would want to achieve that. If he's a real maximum great being, he would want to and would achieve whatever that goal is for creating humans. Premise 3, one way that God could achieve the maximum number of human beings achieving their ultimate purpose is by using divine revelation. He could reveal to them, hey, beeps, this is your ultimate goal. Here's how you do it. Now go do it. Premise 4, okay, but there's a chaos problem with divine revelation. That's obvious. There's a lot of religions claiming to have divine revelation. A lot of people are confused. Well, what is the divine revelation? Premise 5, well, if God did use divine revelation, then he would have to clarify which of the supposed divine revelations is actually from God or not. And he would have to provide some kind of clarifying mechanism. Premise 6, well, religion authenticating miracles that authenticate, hey, this religion is divine revelation, not the other stuff. Yep, that's one example that God could use as a clarifying mechanism. Makes sense? Okay, premise 7. This is the prior probability premise. It just says, look, under certain circumstances, and I was getting confused. So I have it right in the original premise. I wish I could, I wish this stupid thing was hidden. Oh, hang on, maybe I can. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so premise 7, this is the prior probability premise, right? It just says, look, if God exists and he has these motivations, he used divine revelation, and the fact that there is this divine revelation problem, well, then the prior probability that God would use a religion authenticating event in any given case, where there is a religion authenticating context present, that's equally probable. It's either, well, did God have a sufficient reason to will, religious reason, authenticating reason to will to raise Jesus from the dead or not? It's 50-50. We don't know. The prior probability in Bayes' theorem is 50% because We're agnostic. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. We don't know a priori. And there's no reason to think that the prior probability is low based on precedent or, counting up the frequentist approach, counting up the number of random people who've never been raised from the dead, nor even counting up the number of quote unquote people within a religious context itself who have not been raised from the dead. Counterfeit claims don't make any difference. But anyways, premise 7 here is just all this premise is stating, I would have to argue for it, is that given these circumstances and the presence of a detectable religion authenticating context, then the prior probability, it's 50-50 as to whether God willed to do a religion authenticating event or not in those given circumstances. Premise 8, this is what I've done multiple shows on it. This is my criteria. Okay, well, here, if there is an event that meets these 4 to 5 criteria, and that's what I did my debate with Jordan on reason to doubt with, if we have an event that fulfills that, then, yep, that entails that many reasonable real seekers at least could, if not would, actually infer that such events are religion authenticating events or miracles, and therefore conform or commit to that religion. Premise 9, well, if God allowed events as described in premise 8 to occur in relation to religions that are not conducive to or do not facilitate the achievement, the God's goal of having as many human beings achieve their ultimate purpose in creation as possible, well, then many people would unjustifiably, again, not unnecessarily, that's where I need to change stuff, but would unjustifiably fail to achieve their ultimate purposes. And consequently, God would be demonstrated to be inconsistent with his own essential nature. A real maximally great being could not, by definition, fail in achieving his goals. He would have to achieve it, otherwise he's not maximally great. And that's logically impossible to happen. So yeah, God could, this is what I call the undue confusion premise, right? This is just saying God could not allow for undue confusion. He could not allow an event to fulfill the criteria of premise 8 and trick even one reasonable real seeker in a way that it prevents them from achieving their ultimate purpose in creation. Unless there are further clarifying mechanisms. Premise 10, there are no further clarifying mechanisms. And then finally, premise 11. Well, guess what? I've done the research, and it just so happens that Christianity uniquely has events fitting the criteria of being a religion authenticating event. Bada boom, bada bing. That's the argument in a nutshell. There, conclusion. Therefore, Christianity is the religion God wants me to follow in order for as many people as possible to achieve their ultimate purpose in creation. Bada boom, bada bing. A simple argument. There isn't complex technical jargon. I know I've got some quoting words, but come on, if you can't figure out religion authenticating miracle, is that really too hard? Or God outcomes that I give the label go one? Like, come on, if you're a reasonable person, you can take some time and figure this out. It's not overly complicated and stuff like that. And again, when I redo my argument, I'm going to put it in more common terms. It's just that at the time I was using Dr. Michael Martin's argument, because he has this thing where he's talking about G beliefs. And so again, in terms of his argument of confusion here and stuff, right? So he has, where does he's called G beliefs? There we go. Here it is. So I was just, because I was co-opting the atheist, I was trying to be clever. Like, okay, look, there are G belief authenticating events. If that causes confusion for you, then whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. They are miracles that authenticate a religion authenticating miracle. That's what we're talking about. So yeah, I think that's it. Like I said, this is just a very short summary. I think I've gone through the premises. They seem to flow. They make sense. It seems valid and that sort of thing. It seems to make sense. Yeah. It's just, okay, can we provide the soundness? Can we provide the reasons for thinking God exists? The reasons for thinking that if God exists, then he has these goals. So on and so forth, up to premise 11. Well, Okay, that's where we present our reasons for thinking these premises are true. Short, simple, not confusing. I don't know how to make it any simpler for the people that are struggling with this. That's it. I hope this was helpful for the people who are honestly trying to figure things out. Matt's not really interested in the truth, but Tyler is. I think that Tyler cares about the truth, and hey, philosophy is not his thing. So for people like Tyler, I want to bend over backwards, and I hope that this short summary video makes it clear for you, where I'm just uninterrupted, just going through the premises, and it just makes total sense. So yeah, with that said, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys around. All right, bye-bye.